Honorable Laila Tyabji, Honorable Kapla Vasayanji, our trustee, ladies and gentlemen, I extend a very hearty welcome to all of you on this occasion. We are here to remember Kamaladevi ji. India Interest Center has held a tradition of recalling with respect some of those who played a key role in setting up the center. All of those who made it possible, it can be said that Dr. C.D. Deshmukh and Kamaladevi Chattopadhyay played the most fundamental roles. The annual memorial lecture is held in honor of Dr. C.D. Deshmukh. Thanks to the devotion of many of those who knew Kamaladevi ji, especially Dr. Kapla Vasayan, a modest remembrance of Kamaladevi was also initiated. Over the years, the IIC organized some events to recall Kamaladevi's contribution to the nation as well as her contribution in other areas. Simultaneously, there were discussions on how to mark Kamaladevi's contribution in a more substantial way, not only as an annual event, but something more that would enable the center's community as well as those outside to understand and learn from the lived experience of Kamaladevi Chattopadhyay. Therefore, in consultation of a few friends, it was decided to try and further probe into her history through exhibitions and talks. It is befitting that today's talk on Remembering Kamaladevi ji is by Laila Tyabji, Chairperson and Founder Member of DASTKAR, craft activist, designer and writer. She will speak today on craft in the age of technology, being a 21st century Indian craftsperson. Over the past 35 years, DASTKAR and Laila ji have worked with numerous crafts organizations and NGOs to use crafts skill as a means of earning and empowerment. She is credited with revolutionizing the craft industry in India by developing a market for Indian crafts, modernizing the artisan skill, and acting as the liaising link between the artisans and the buyers. DASTKAR operates on the policy of leaving the ownership of the goods to the artisans who produce them, retaining a 10% revenue towards the operating cost. It provides the artisans with entrepreneurial training and assists them with credit, designs, and product development techniques. The organization has a producer group base of 700 artisan groups, collectively comprising over 1 lakh craftspeople. Under the aegis of DASTKAR, Laila ji has worked with Self-Employed Women Association of India, that is SEVA, a similar non-governmental organization founded by renowned Gandhian Ila Bhatt, Urmul, Sandur Kushal Kala Kendra, Rangasutra, Saha, Berozgar Mahila Kalyan Samiti, and many others. Other major DASTKAR projects are in Kashmir for the social re-establishment of victims of terrorism, in Ranthambore for the rehabilitation of people who were evacuated from the national park, and in Bellary for the revival of the dying art of Lumbini embroidery. With these few words, I stop here. I once again welcome all of you and invite Laila ji to deliver her talk. Thank you very much.
Shall I do a Rahul Gandhi, but they need 2 of them then. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's an exciting and also emotive occasion celebrating Kamaladevi Chattopadhyay. She was someone I admired greatly, a role model and mentor. Kamaladevi had stature, culture, intellect, humor, an innate style and charisma, humanity, and most importantly, a concern, passion, and commitment to India, its crafts, and its people. A capacity for telling the truth, which often got her into trouble, in a political landscape more accustomed to sycophancy, but she had the charm and humor that softened the sting. Sadly, I only knew her at the end of her life when I came back from Japan to work as a freelance designer. She died before I made my own definitive commitment to craft. But she was always part of my subconscious. Many of my great aunts and great uncles were also involved in the freedom struggle with Gandhi, so there was a long-term family connection. Later, working with craft and design, I obviously met her, interacted with her, and was intensely inspired, although we never actually worked together. My father especially had a deep affection for her distinctive charisma and warmth. He was one of the few people at the end of her life, when she had become an iconic figure viewed with awe and reverence, who could remind her of his first sighting of her lying in silks and jewels on a tiger skin at some theatrical drama in Hyderabad in the 1930s. She used to giggle and quite enjoy being teased about this long ago moment of youth, beauty, and fun, especially at a time when so many things she had passionately strived for seemed to be disintegrating and in decay. While we rightly deplore what is going on around us now, we must remember that the rot set in much earlier. Craft in India is a very curious thing. It is, as is often said, the second largest sector of employment after agriculture. It produces things of extraordinary cultural, social, and aesthetic significance over 5,000 years, as well as being one of the largest contributors to the GNP and export. India's arts, artifacts, textiles, and architecture, and the skill sets that create them are what most outsiders notice about India. Paradoxically, however, in India itself, it remains one of the most neglected, unappreciated areas. Craftspeople are still marginalized, their earnings well below the stipulated minimum wage, their social status slipping slower and lower every generation. Their products are on all the tourist posters, but they themselves seldom figure in any media coverage except when dying of starvation. Many have talked of Kamaladevi's path-breaking work, reviving and bringing so many indigenous crafts to the mainstream market. But for me, her inspiration has always been how she worked with craftspeople. She always cared deeply about craftspeople. For her, they always came first, not the crafts products they made. Pupul Jaikar was often called the Tsarina of Indian crafts, but for craftspeople, Kamaladevi was their mother. Without her inspirational lead and ceaseless grassroots work, India would be much like our other South Asian neighbors, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, with no formal government policy or established craft institutions. True, Mahatma Gandhi had made rural hand skills, khadi and handlooms, an integral part of the freedom movement. But I'm not sure whether it would have remained a central pillar in post-independence policy without Kamaladevi to push it in every forum, often exasperating economists, bureaucrats, and planners whose model and inspiration was the Western Industrial Revolution in its totality. What a multifaceted person Kamaladevi was, an activist and freedom fighter, a champion of women's rights, someone engaged in the performing arts, dance, theater, and music, and many, many social causes, as well as crafts. Since she was so many things, freedom fighter, writer, theater person, social activist, cultural ambassador for India, thinker, writer, it's impossible to list all her contributions. But in the craft and handloom sector, she was the person who first reached out to craftspeople all over the country, listing and connecting them to the national schemes and marketing networks she helped create. The Central Cottage Industries, KVIC, the Handloom Board, the Crafts Councils of India, and later the Crafts Museum, NICA, and Apna Bazaar. She also set up and developed policies and guidelines for these new government organizations and schemes. As part of this, she motivated young designers, merchandisers, and researchers to work with craftspeople. Jasleen Dhamija, Prabha Shah, Suraya Hassan, Swatantrata Prakash, Iola Basu, Elsie Jain were some of those early post-independence pioneers. These, in turn, inspired others. She was a firm believer in the cooperative movement, encouraging craftspeople and weavers to come together and market through collective organizations. Many government craft support schemes under her guidance were reserved for cooperatives and societies. Unfortunately, the cooperative movement very rapidly became corrupt and stagnant. Though practical, Kamaladevi was also an idealist and perhaps did not build in enough checks and balances to prevent misuse of funds by both government departments dispersing money and the office bearers of the cooperatives who were receiving it. Stagnant, mismanaged government craft institutions and emporias over the last few decades show us what happens when there's no person at the center of the political system who is really passionate about crafts and other cultural industries. If Kamaladevi had a failing, it was the national malaise that has caused so many wonderful Indian organizations to crumble, of not being able to build up a second-rung leadership. Like other inspirational and visionary leaders post-independence, she did not realize the importance of creating autonomous local institutions that were independent of government and building in continuity, systems, and sustainability. At that time of selfless idealism, it was difficult to foresee that future generations of politicians and bureaucrats would not have the same principled mindset. Planning was far too centralized and dependent on government support. I think Kamaladevi also did not realize the extent that craftspeople would need formal education to cope with today's highly professional marketplace. Otherwise, I'm sure she would have worked to make education more relevant and accessible for young craftspeople. Kamaladevi realized that many craft traditions were no longer viable in their local markets where they'd formerly been sold. Disappearing royal patronage, changing lifestyles, and the availability of new machine-made products had all affected demand. Craftspeople were suffering and disheartened. So by creating marketing networks and support systems for these rural craftspeople through which they could enter the urban market, she enabled the survival of crafts which would otherwise have died. She also created national awareness of these traditions by documenting and writing about them. Practically every craft you can think of, from ikat weaving to dhokra metalwork, from the northeast to Kanyakumari, might have disappeared if it was not for her journeys all over India, meeting, encouraging, and documenting Indian craft traditions and communities, and then getting them appreciated and sold in urban India. Her mixture of practical common sense and passionate idealism inspired faith in rural craftspeople, just when industrialization and mechanization seemed to be taking over. 3 decades after Kamaladevi left us, India has nuclear capability and the world's fastest growing IT industry, but we also still have crafts and millions of craftspeople. Crafts are part of our aesthetic and culture, but they are also a vital part of our economy, in our marketplace, as well as our cultural memory. All over India, people handcraft everything from a terracotta tumbler to a temple, a wicker basket to diamond jewelry. India, trying to create a contemporary identity for itself in a largely technological age, is stumbling between tradition and modernity, east and west, branded and handmade, global and rural. Powerful electronic media, beaming 24/7 images, means that the young are overly influenced by one-sided signals and role models. This is particularly so in matters of culture, lifestyle, and aesthetic, but also in its choice of professions and the value it gives them. The buzzwords these last few years were Make in India and Skilling India, India was trying to sell itself to the world as a manufacturer, and at the same time, agonizing on how it could upskill the millions of aspirational youth that are looking for jobs and a sustainable wage. Thousands of institutes, courses, and training centers are being set up all over India. Hundreds of government departments, committees, and task forces are brainstorming strategies. From air hostesses and call centers to sophisticated IT, hotel management, and engineering, a gamut of skills, products, and career options are being set in motion to conquer poverty and unemployment, to win orders for India from the rest of the world. In all this, we seem to have overlooked something important. To quote the old adage, we seem to have missed the wood for the trees. India is already an extraordinary repository of amazing skills. Skills that the rest of the world has lost and is now mourning. While we try to reinvent ourselves and acquire skills that other more advanced countries acquired decades ago, we ignore this existing gold mine. Instead of investing in, developing, and promoting our unique skill sets and knowledge systems, we are allowing them to die. For lack of equal opportunity, their owners are leaving the sector in droves. Even more grievous, the skills being so expensively promoted encourage potential job seekers to migrate to India's already overburdened cities. This places a further overload on our already inadequate urban infrastructure. On the other hand, crafts are based in rural India, made from locally available materials and perfectly suited to rural production systems and social structures. They also, and this is crucially important, bring rural women into the economy, creating double-income households in otherwise distressed farming communities. Increasingly, other Asian countries, Thailand, Indonesia, Cambodia, Malaysia, the Philippines, have realized that indigenous crafts can give them an international edge, that crafts and craftspeople using natural materials handcrafted in uniquely local traditions have an appeal both as merchandise and as part of the new ecotourism boom. Only India views its 20 million plus craftspeople as a liability rather than an asset. Instead of investing in the sector, the general wisdom is to prop it up with subsidies till it disappears altogether. And slowly but surely, it is disappearing. Few craftspeople value their own skills. When I was teaching sex workers in Sialda jail, Kantha, a couple of decades ago, they frankly preferred sticking to their own profession. At least we know we'll be paid for our work, was one sardonic remark. Few craftspeople want their children to be craftspeople. Official figures show we lose over 15% of our craftspeople every decade. Nevertheless, and here's another paradox, craft sales, both domestically and export, are increasing at 15 to 20% each year. Recently, at our 12-day nature bazaar, in a hot, open-air space 45 minutes from the center of Delhi, DASTKAR sold 2.5 crore rupees worth of crafts and textiles. Some years ago, I was in China. Can you get me the water, please? Some years ago, I was in China. The Chinese, who are extraordinarily savvy about their strengths and weaknesses and what works in the competitive global marketplace, had just announced that craft is one of the 8 major sectors they were going to concentrate on in the next decade. They declared 25 cities as craft cities and are investing hugely in them. Dongyang, for example, is the center for wood carving, and everything from the sprawling conference center to temples and corporate offices feature the most elaborate, large-scale wood carving. Not itsy-bitsy boxes and napkin rings, but 3-story, highly intricate carved paneling. Master craftspeople are given subsidized housing and work in luxurious, fully equipped studios, complete with air conditioning and piped music. Their salaries reflect their perceived status in society. They're part of the professional middle class. The Chinese realize that cheap bric-a-brac will not command the price that handcraft should rightfully get. So low-priced tourist souvenirs are now mass-produced in factories, alas, many sold in India. Meanwhile, genuinely skilled Chinese craftspeople are encouraged to think big and add value to their products and given every means to do so. India is always feeling threatened by China's phenomenal growth and wanting to emulate it. This is one area we do have something to learn. But instead of thinking big, we actively encourage our craftspeople to make things smaller and cheaper. The whole advantage of craft is that each piece is unique. We should promote that exclusivity. The descendants of the master artisans who crafted the Taj Mahal now make little pill boxes that sell for $2. The USP to sell Indian crafts must be quality rather than quantity, premium products for discriminating premium customer, unique, one-of-a-kind pieces rather than mass production. Innovation and design, too, is an important aspect, often ignored. There's a complacency that with such rich ancient traditions, changing them is not only unnecessary, but sacrilege. Wrong. Craft has always been changing and reinventing itself, and it must respond to the shifts in society and lifestyles. If it remains static, it gradually withers away and dies. India is a treasure house of materials, motives, forms, and techniques. These are an amazing foundation for innovative new design. The challenge is to use these in a lively, fresh way, to be Indian without being boringly ethnic, to be contemporary without being derivatively Western. Foreign designers borrow freely from our Indian design directory while preserving their own signature. We too should see tradition as a springboard, not a cage, to innovate and diversify, add value, improve finish and functionality. 43 years ago, I stepped off a train into an unknown world. A young freelance designer who'd worked on varied but basically urban projects in interiors, graphics, and fashion. I was starting a new assignment as visiting designer for Gurjari, the State Handicrafts Corporation in Kutch. Kutch and its crafts was relatively unknown in the 1970s, and my job was to travel from village to village, community to community, documenting and then working to tweak traditional skills into what would suit contemporary lifestyles. Those 6 months in Kutch changed my life. It reaffirmed my belief that the strength and survival of India, aesthetically, economically, and culturally, is not in its malls or in its government ministries, or even in its mandirs and masjids, but in its many communities, cultures, and skills. Working with traditional craftspeople is not just a good thing, it enhances and enriches your own life. Experiencing craft also means experiencing the cultural wisdom that goes with it. While craft traditions distinguish communities, they also link them together. A Hindu weaver weaves the cloth a Muslim Khatri block prints or tribal Lambani embroiders. The Bengali patwas who draw the scrolls and sing the stories of Sita or the snake goddess Mansa Devi think of themselves as both Muslim and Hindu, bearing names of both faiths. The Kasuti embroidered Chandakala sari of North Karnataka is worn by Hindu brides, but often embroidered by Muslim women. Its motifs full of Hindu symbolism, the Rath, the Kalash, Krishna's Jhula, the elephant, the 8-pointed star. This sharing of heritage, flowing into and contributing to each other, is what makes India so rich and special. It's what also bonds us together. It's no coincidence that those centers of India, largely unaffected by communal violence, are those where the different communities are economically interlinked and interdependent. Banaras, for example, where the silk weavers are Muslims and the dalal wholesalers are Hindus. Or Lucknow, where Hindu traders market the chicken embroidered by Muslim karigars. In Kutch, shared economies and differing but compatible skills help mutual bonding and trust. Muslim Khatris dyeing and block printing for Wankar weavers, and Rabari and Jat embroiderers, the Mochi community supplying beautifully worked footwear and saddles. Isolation from mainstream politics helped too. In 2001, however, a devastating earthquake suddenly put Kutch on everyone's front pages. I was there a few days after the event. The different agencies who came into the region for relief each had their own agenda. They attempted to create conflicts between different castes and communities. Rumors of fabricated incidents were rife, and both the locals and outside agencies were playing one off against each other for everything from tents to spiritual solace. Relief was doled out as per religious denomination or political affiliation. The BJP, under the aegis of Sahib Singh Varma, were vying for adopting Dhamadka and dividing it into Muslim, Harijan, and upper caste Hindu camps. World Vision was distributing Bibles, and Jamaat-e-Islami and RSS banners were everywhere. All we want is a means to stand on our own feet again. We will rebuild our own lives ourselves, said one exasperated Ajak printer from Dhamadka village. Despite these divisive forces, working together, craftspeople made Kutch a place on the international craft map, realizing that your own identity is your USP, but it should complement another's, not divide you. Crafts binds, but sadly, it also separates. The biggest, most painful paradox for craftspeople is that despite being skilled repositories of our ancient knowledge systems, they have no social value. The product is welcome in drawing rooms, adorning a bride's trousseau. The craftsperson who made it is not. Craftspeople are regarded as best as picturesque exhibits, neither skilled professionals or creative artists. Laying a warp for an ikat sari requires the same level of mathematics as software programming, but one skill is seen as superior, the other as picturesque but primitive. Indians are good at creating new caste systems of color, creed, even language. The craftspeople I work with suffer different forms of disenfranchisement. Seen as best as picturesque exhibits of an exotic but irrelevant India rather than skilled professionals. There's a funny but also sad story of craftspeople taken to a festival of India in London. It was winter and cold, and they all rushed off to Oxford Street, bought bright stripy sweaters and socks, plus big shiny watches to show their foreign return status. At the exhibition gallery, however, Indian officials told them to take off their sweaters and watches, put on their turbans and pointy-toed jutis. Otherwise, they would spoil the photographs and not look like craftspeople. Back in India, the reverse goes. When I ask our Lambani craftswomen why they prefer wearing nylon mill-printed saris rather than their own glorious mirrored and embroidered costumes, they say it is because, as jungly tribals, they're not allowed into temples or even cafes. When I took Shantabai and Gauribai to Sweden, their wonderful clothes made them the much admired cynosure of all eyes. But in their native North Karnataka, their clothes are a sign of their otherness and inferiority. So what do craftspeople make of it all? There's a sadness, a sense of being misplaced. Valued professionals have become picturesque relics, increasingly seen as passive makers rather than creators, with the design process in the hands and minds of a designer or an entrepreneur. They experience the frustration of making hundreds of pieces exactly the same, when the uniqueness of craft is that each piece can be different. Usually invisible, at best the craftsperson's public face is as an exhibit and entertainer, the quality and authenticity of the craft less important. This needs to change, and NGOs must partner the process, not control it. We need to be celebrating these makers and their skills, not downplaying or ignoring them. I have received many awards, but I still work on the footpath, said one. is the grave pit, not the loom pit, says another weaver. His grim words borne out by recurring headlines of starvation deaths of handloom weavers. When we began our DASTKAR Ranthambore project 28 years ago, creating livelihood options for the relocated communities around the Tiger Park, one of the people we encountered was Gendi Lal, a leather craftsperson in Kundera village. He had lost his living due to local herders and farmers opting for new plastic chappals instead of his sturdy but more expensive leather jutis. We helped him and a group of other leather workers use their punching, plaiting, cutwork skills to make sandals, chappals, bags, belts, and accessories for the urban market. And these proved immensely popular. Soon Gendi Lal and his group were traveling all over India, supplying to retail stores as well as selling directly through the DASTKAR bazaars. Gendi Lal's son was soon able to send his son to a fee-paying school, and the next fabulous news was that he'd got admission to college. Sadly, college taught the boy to look down on the very profession that had given him his education. When he completed his BA, he couldn't get a job, but he didn't want to continue in the leather business. In vain, we told him that his education in literacy would give him that edge to take the family skill to the next entrepreneurial level. These days, Puran loiters around Savai Madhopur town, occasionally getting a part-time job at the village school, generally unemployed, his aspirations far exceeding his abilities. He prefers being an out-of-work BA to being a leather craftsperson. How can we re-establish the social acceptability of craft? We need to break out of this caste system of city versus village, literate versus non-literate, new Western technology versus traditional skill sets, and value the unique knowledge systems that are our heritage. After all, if we've done it for yoga, we can do it for craft. Since the millennium, DASTKAR and I have been working in Kashmir, one of the most challenging of many challenging projects. They're huge skills, but the impediments are equally overwhelming. Insurgency, buns, strikes, violent outbursts, police and military shootings, and summary arrests interrupt the once placid beauty of the valley. Almost every family in the valley is dependent on craft, making it, selling it, living off it. That rhythm has come to a halt. It's not just that it's impossible to plan anything. Simply dyeing a piece of cloth or finding a tailor or printing a khaka design becomes a game of chance. Is the shop open? Is the man still working? Is he dead or in jail? Will there be a curfew to prevent one from moving out that day? I've been holed up in a printer's attic for an afternoon, bullets rattling on the tin fascia, while police first water cannoned and then fired as stone pelters. I have also seen death in the village where we were working. The army was looking for rumored militants and told us to lie flat in our workroom. 2 young boys rushed out to see the fun and were shot dead by Jawans who were as panicky and raw to all this as we were. Tourism and trade had almost come to a halt as few visitors to the valley came to the craftspeople had lost contact with their buyers and markets, and also their confidence and creativity. They were churning out the same small, cheap knickknacks of over 3 decades. In this scenario, we, a group of unknown Delhiites, all of us non-Kashmiris, most of us non-Muslims, were greeted with skepticism. Only their innate Kashmiri tehzeeb prevented them from telling us to get lost. 15 years later, not only are the crafts and master skills of our Commitment to Kashmir project reaching new Indian markets, but they themselves are traveling to mainland India and learning that all Indians are not the enemy and that others too suffer from prejudice and oppression. There is friendship, sharing, and strength. When we started the project, one of our young village embroiderers had to jump out of her bedroom window to catch the train to Delhi. Her brother had locked her in to prevent her consorting with the oppressors. Today, she's on Facebook with craftspeople and customers all over India. Income generation is not by itself a synonym for development, but it can be the key and catalyst to development's many processes: education, health, community building, the repudiation of social prejudices, the empowerment of women. When DASTKAR started its project in Ranthambore 28 years ago, I lived and worked out of a small one-room hut in Chairperson village. The women crowded around, fascinated by this Delhi Benji, while I taught them craft skills as earning for themselves and their families. Initially, women of different castes and religions wanted separate timings to come to the room. The first time a Dalit woman came for work, she crouched outside the door. It was she herself, not the upper-class women, who explained with shocked disbelief at my naivety that she could not enter. I had to literally pull her in. When a Muslim child peed on the floor, the Hindu women fled in horror and wanted the whole place repainted. Today, the 600 plus men and women in the project work, travel, cook, eat, and drink together, marveling at the folly that kept them separate for so long. At the annual picnic, the men make the women sit and serve them, Hindus and Muslims, Dalits and upper castes alike. Once again, sharing with and knowing the other has broken down previous taboos and fears. Recently, Rameshwari, Rais and Shamim, Farida, women from the Ranthambore project, were just back from Chennai, where they sold over 5 lakhs in 9 days. Their turnover last year was almost 2 crores. They've taught themselves to read and write, make their own bills, and interact with customers. The local doctor says he can recognize a DASTKAR craftswoman from half a kilometer away just by the way she walks and holds her head. As we sit and sew together, I ask the women what they will do with their money. Some silver jewelry, of course, but also better seeds and a buffalo. The ability to send their children by bus to a fee-paying school. Medical treatment and their tubes tied at a proper hospital. A new well in the village. They have their own bank accounts to prevent misappropriation by drunken or gambling husbands. They all want pakka houses. Rameshwari is a widow and has paid for her children's weddings through her own earnings. Methods of birth control are canvassed along with color combinations. Old women learn that writing their names is no more difficult than threading a needle. Children who wander in are conned into blowing runny noses and learning new skills. While working together, songs and stories and folklore are swapped for political gossip and revolutionary ideas of social change. The women have set up their own savings group and lend money to the whole village. So what is impeding Indian craftspeople from taking their place as proud 21st century professionals? One reason, of course, is the conflict for the young craftsperson between the need for formal education and learning the family craft skill. Today, they're torn between learning ancestral knowledge systems in the traditional way and risking missing out on other 21st century educational opportunities. So either they become unlettered artisans, placed very low on the social and professional hierarchy, or if they do opt for formal education, they despise the traditional skill, but often do not qualify for alternative occupations. As a result, the traditions, techniques, and motive directory of craft are being passed on not by father to son, mother to daughter, but by intermediaries, designers, boutique owners, export buyers, and NGOs, government handicrafts emporia, well-meaning but not always knowledgeable enough to be sensitive to its origins and its potential, turning tradition into bite-sized snapshots, art forms into cheap souvenirs. Crafts are being engineered to fit airline weight restrictions and tourist suitcases. We wax nostalgic about the golden ages of Indian craft, whether the ateliers of the Mughal court or that of the Gupta period, or the pieces displayed in the Indian section of the 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition. But we make no attempt to replicate the climate of enlightened patronage and support that produced these masterpieces. Instead, we see an increased dumbing down of craft. We could still produce Taj Mahals, but prefer to make those 150 rupee pill boxes with their lids that fall off. Today, handloom, handmade, natural dyed, natural fibers, eco-friendly are the Asian equivalent of designer labels. Truly beautiful artifacts and home accessories will always find buyers. We should build on this and junk the cheaper, tackier souvenirs of the past. Craftspeople are generally gentle, creative artists, not pushy entrepreneurs. They're not very good at selling themselves. They don't know how to cost their own products or value them, how to cash into the many new opportunities and marketing mechanisms that now exist. If craftspeople are to be on par with other professionals, they need skills other than simply craftsmanship, entrepreneurship, merchandising, finance, IT know-how, access to technology and contemporary design, plus the same aids that other industries take for granted: credit, R&D, upgraded schools, tools and technology, adequate storage and marketing facilities. Where do they acquire this? How do we embed these functions in crafts communities without impacting on the cultural and social sensitivities of their way of life? How do we guard against a commercial commodification of craft? Young craftspeople today do perceive the advantages of learning the terminology and practice of design, graphic communication, and entrepreneurship, along with English and accountancy, as a way to upgrade and add value to the skills that they've inherited from their forefathers. Institutions like Judy Frater's path-breaking Kala Raksha Vidyalaya, Sally Holkar's Handloom School, the Craft Development Institute in Srinagar, IICD, and now Commitment to Kashmir and the Sumaya Kala Vidya, have given them the confidence and competencies to use their creativity in new ways. It's a joy to see them expertly using their mobile phones and the internet to innovate and learn new aptitudes. They look at their traditions as a calling card, not a cage. We need to replicate these models all over India, but sensitively. The digital revolution has transformed what was becoming a sad story. Smartphones, computers, and the internet have given craftspeople direct access to both their customers and to design inspiration. Everyone, even people who don't have a toilet or running water, have a cell phone. It's an extraordinarily powerful tool. Just this morning, I was WhatsApping one of our craftswomen in Banaskantha, and she sent me an image of a sari that we are working on together. I sent it back with a scribble showing where she had to add a motif and a picture of the color of thread she had to use. In 20 minutes, she had WhatsApped me a picture of the completed piece, and I sent her a thumbs up. Ganga Ben is not literate, but she handles her cell phone with aplomb. Everyone can understand a smiley or a thumbs up. What a communication revolution for those of us who remember when it took a fortnight for a telegram to reach rural India. The craft sector is usually thought of as culture, economics, aesthetics. However, craft is also a binding force, uniting otherwise marginalized communities, bringing people of different regions, religions, castes, and gender together, creating a bonding that has withstood huge cultural and social divides. The winds of the Mandal Commission, the breaking of Babri Masjid, the Gujarat riots, the alienation of Kashmir from mainstream India. Working together over the years, I recall Muslim women happily singing bhajans in a dharamsala and traditionally male chauvinist Rajasthani males cooking dal, bhati, churma for their busy women folk. Tribals from Jharkhand helping Brahmin Madhubani craftswomen add up their bills. And most poignantly, the solace and sympathy of women of all castes and creeds to a grieving mother whose child had died in a communal clash. The radiant kaleidoscope of our DASTKAR bazaars reminds one of the multi-layered multiplicity of India's crafts and craftspeople, that diverse magic, their many diverging and converging cultural streams, the color and chaos, the hit and miss jugaad of past and present, its unexpected survival in this technologically obsessed world, its inherent resilience, and how important it is to keep all the bits contrasting and yet interlocking together. In the Chinese script, the characters for crisis and opportunity are the same. Craft today, so full of potential and yet marginalized in crisis, is an opportunity to creatively convert tradition and diversity into strength. It's time, in the words of Mohan Rao, the textile activist and crusader, to change the perception from doomed cultural icons to cutting-edge innovators. Young millennials working in craft today know little of Kamaladevi, Popul Jaikar, Prem Berry, Elsie Jain, Suman Benigal, Iola Basu, Swatantrata Prakash. They feel that these oldies are irrelevant. But without knowing the trajectory of their work and where it succeeded and where it failed, we will repeat all the old mistakes all over again, looking at craftspeople simply as passive hands or picturesque relics, not investing more in ergonomic means of production or the education and infrastructure that could empower them. One of my enduring memories of Kamaladevi was a birthday party organized for her with great love by the Delhi Crafts Council, almost at the end of her life. It was a beautiful occasion with a cake, delicious eats, and an exquisitely decorated table. She came in looking frail and tiny and exhausted, but then roused into animation and gave us all beans, an impassioned exhortation to do something. Celebration was all very well, but the issues of craftspeople were our agenda, not birthday parties. It was typical of her and her ability to cut to the chase. We need hundreds, if not thousands, of Kamaladevis today. We are in a curious situation where nationally and internationally, crafts and handlooms have a huge demand and potential. Slow fashion, green means of production, natural organic materials are the direction in which the international market is moving. Yet craftspeople are still marginalized, underpaid, and under-recognized. Their amazing knowledge systems and skill sets still regarded as somehow inferior to technologies and know-how. Kamaladevi gave craftspeople the dignity they deserved and restored their pride and confidence. And through her books, speeches, and activism, she created a public recognition of the rich cultural, social, and economic value of the sector. We badly need that impetus today. Some years ago, we were visiting a weaving village, and a Western buyer asked one of the women how she liked her products being sold in London and Paris. She said, "We makers should be there too." He laughed, rather taken aback, and said, "Okay, next time I'll put you in my suitcase." This little woman looked him firmly in the eye and replied, "I don't want to be in your suitcase. I want my own seat on the plane." Our job is to get craftspeople that seat on the plane. Thank you. Short questions, and do introduce yourselves.
A few questions, please.
Can I start off?
Yes, please.
Amina Gupta, the kind of remarks that really bugs me is that the young girls today are not wearing saris. They say it's so dowdy to wear saris, and they all wear these very sequin lehengas. Weddings is okay, but even ordinarily, nobody's wearing a sari these days. So maybe that's the reason why handicrafts women are discouraged from producing more and more saris.
Well, I'm happy to tell you that that has really changed in the last 5 years, and even handloom weavers are saying that there's a new demand for saris, people are wearing saris again. And I think that one of the joys of India is that we can have a foot in both cultures. And I think access is the thing, and availability is the thing, and knowledge is the thing. And I think social media has done a lot to actually promote saris. And I am always having young people come up and say, you know, I saw that photograph and I want to wear a sari, help me buy a sari. And when I think of my 20s and 30s, I also used to wear everything from bell bottoms to bikinis, but now I'm the sari lady. So I'm quite hopeful that people will realize that there's nothing like a sari. It doesn't work for perhaps every occasion or every lifestyle, but there are moments in your life when you need saris, and if you can make those saris available for people to buy, they will buy them, and they are buying them.
Laila, may I?
Yes, yes, please.
Where are you?
Yeah.
I recognize the voice, but oh my God, huh? Hi.
What does that mean? Oh my
It
God.
means that I
But
didn't realize that
Laila,
this intimidating lady was sitting here.
Laila,
Huh.
what a fantastic presentation. As usual.
Thank you.
You told me not to come, but I told you I have to come, because every time I hear you, you have something new to share. But today I have a bone to pick with you.
I knew it. I knew there was a sting at the end.
How can you say,
Huh?
how can you say that there are not 100 Kamaladevi Jis? One example of an extraordinary person is the one who's just finished speaking, Laila Tyabji. I mean, you have created leadership, you were inspired by her, and you have women entrepreneurs, men entrepreneurs amongst the master craftsmen, struggling people, and they are a legion. And people have done what we failed to do. I'm saying the past generation who've been working. You have done so much, and those whom you have inspired, and there are hundreds of them all over India. And I sometimes feel that in some cases we have done better than before. Nowadays, I mean, Niranjan, the son of our great Shilpa Guru, who studied chartered accountancy and then gave it up and came back to Kalamkari and is producing such exquisite work. The Kalamkari which had died out is doing extraordinary work. The weaving which is being, I know craftsmen are marginalized, but it's a far cry from what it was when Kamaladevi ji began the whole. People are so pessimistic. I'm not. I'm optimistic. With people like you and many more like you, we know them. I don't want to name them because they are a legion. We will go forward.
Thank you.
Any question further? Yes. Madam, please identify yourself.
Yeah, my name is Meeta. Yeah. I want to know have been your mentors and who are the people you have been inspired by?
Well, Kamaladevi, of course, but Jasleen sitting there. Elsie was somebody, Elsie Jain was somebody who really helped us shape DASTKAR when we first started. He even gave us the name. DASTKAR was his idea. And we used to go to him and literally sit at his feet and learn how to form something, because he was always somebody who was very practical, and he was able to help us shape the organization in a way that would make it work and, you know, get away from this idea of social work as seva, but as something that was sustainable and that would create sustainability in the people that we worked with. That was always very important to us in DASTKAR. But there were many people along the way, many craftspeople whom I met. Ismail Bhai in Kutch was an inspirational person, and so many, many others whom one met. There was this little girl, Saira, in Seva Lucknow, who was totally crippled, and yet the joy that she got from her work and the way that the money that she got from earning and doing chicken changed her life, both medically and otherwise. You know, there were these pointers which showed that if you did something, it could make a difference. And that, I think, helped one go forward at times when it was also very frustrating and difficult.
Any? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Carpentier. I would like to ask you if you would agree with the strategy that I heard from a gentleman some time ago in a meeting, where he was saying, you see, the problem with Indian craft is that it is still carried out by families working in their often very uncomfortable homes, whereas he said the Chinese have brought a lot of craftsmen into large air-conditioned facilities, and we should do the same in India. Now, do you think that craft is intimately linked to this kind of traditional family environment, and that it should avoid trying to group people into large-scale modern facilities? Thank you.
Well, I will answer this by actually telling you of that trip to China, which I referred to earlier, where we were shown these amazing workplaces with every facility and whatever. And I had gone with a group of, I think there were 8 Indian craftspeople who were part of that visit, and we were taken and shown all these facilities. And I asked some of the Indian craftspeople, and I said, how do you feel? Because the Chinese were, of course, telling us how much craftspeople were earning, the kind of workspaces, the flats that they were given, the education that children were given, all those things. And out of the 8 that we had taken, there was only one who deferred. The others all said that we would hate to work in this kind of factory situation, where what we love about craft is that when we get up in the morning, we can decide what we want to make, and we can take that idea in our head and translate it into a product. While here it's an assembly line where somebody is doing the design, somebody else is doing the basic carving, someone else is doing the finishing, and so it doesn't belong to anybody. And we don't want that. There was one wood artisan from Saharanpur, and he said, well, I would love it because I've worked for 56 years and I don't have any money, I don't even own my own home, and if someone gave me this facility, I'd love it. But others didn't want it. For them, their individual creativity and their independence was more important. Of course, they would love to earn more.
Yes, madam.
I'm Gillian Wright. Thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. I realize from what you said the problems with government, but what steps, concrete steps immediately should and ideally a government take to encourage craft, bearing in mind that I think up till now craftspeople have not even been enumerated?
Yes, it's easy to actually bash our government or successive governments. There's actually not very much difference between the way different governments in India since independence, since I think the 60s actually, have treated the craft sector. It's always been looked at as a rather, sad sector which has to be supported rather than invested in. And I think that that's the problem. There's a kind of typecasting of craftspeople as rather impractical and not fitting into this new technological country that India is aiming to become. And for me, it seems that if people could start looking at the craft sector like any other sector of the economy and invest in it the same way and give it the same support, it would be wonderful. This hasn't yet happened. There are lots of schemes, but they're all very complicated and very rigid, and they don't take into fact that every crafts community is really different and has a different need. The other thing is, I think that you can't look at the crafts community, rural crafts community in isolation. You have to see it needs supports there around it, which, as I always say, ancillary industries and activities which could generate employment as well. But if they have storage, if they have seasoning plants, if they have dyeing and packaging and dry cleaning and all those facilities around it, they could professionalize the whole production much more effectively.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, I'm Chandra Mohan, faculty of Delhi University. Now, I have a brief query. These days, we are focusing on Gandhi 150 year anniversary, and Government of India, also HRD and UGC, they are supporting this whole thing. We told them that instead of giving us money for organizing some conferences or seminars, why don't you come to a practical aspect? Ila Bahan was with us, Seva proprietor. She said, okay, this could be one factor. But since you are here, and luckily we have you here, maybe you can also give some striking paths which we can include in that way.
I think we should perhaps have an email exchange or something so we can discuss some of these ideas.
Okay. Last question.
My name is Tanveen. I work with Laila and I work in crafts also. My question is, I've been struggling with one of the things that you were talking about, these small pill boxes versus large scale craft. So I had been doing small pill box kind of products for the longest time, for 10 years now. And now I want to shift to doing more luxe crafts. So I'm just curious to know more about what you said, because the dilemma is that it's when you're starting, it's easy to do smaller products. You have that kind of money, you can do it, you can sell it easier. It requires a completely different mindset to do the more luxury crafts. So just your comment.
I don't think that I'm saying that you have to, completely give up one and do the other, because obviously you have to contend with the marketplace, and the markets in India are very multi-layered, and consumer pockets are also very varying in their capacity. But I do think that we have to change this whole way that when craftspeople, for instance, many of them make their entry for the first time from rural India to urban India in a bazaar, whether it's Delhi Haat or DASTKAR or wherever. And I think that the whole thing would have so much more impact if, along with the smaller products, they had other things of different price points and different functions, as well as one or two really outstanding pieces, which would make the whole thing look so much richer and make people understand the potential that you have in that craft. And where we've done that, I think it has been much more successful. And but even more than scaling down, I think is this thing of everything having to be exactly the same. It's so difficult for the handcraft process to make things the same, to get them identical. It's quite different in rural India, difficult in rural India, even to get raw material of, say, 15 meters or 20 meters, which is the same color and the same quantity. So why do we always do that? Why don't we make a strength out of what is otherwise seen as a weakness?
So, friends, we now come at the end of the program. On behalf of India International Center, on behalf of all of you, on my own behalf, I thank Mrs. Laila Tyabji for this one. Miss Laila Tyabji for this wonderful talk. And through her talk, certainly we have all remembered the good old memories of Kamaladevi. And such talks are real tribute to Kamaladevi. We look forward to more and more such talks from Laila ji in days ahead. Thank you very much, madam. And let us give a big hand to her.